But I think while thinking back, revisiting this memory, what I realized was probably as a 9-year old, I understood two things about forgiveness in general. One was that forgiveness or the punishment when forgiveness doesn't happen, there needs to be a timeline. You cannot be angry forever. So you cannot.
Certainly, in among adults, it's quite common that the one who is guilty does not even feel guilty, and that makes it even more difficult to forgive. And also, the consequences of hurting somebody are quite different. Among children, it's only minor things and minor consequences. In case of adults, the consequences can be really much more serious. They may actually have a lifelong impact on somebody's existence.
Another reason why we don't forgive is because we know exactly what forgiveness is capable of doing, because we ourselves have been forgiven once. So when a loved one forgives us, it's like a rebirth of the soul. If it's true, genuine forgiveness, we are allowed to re enter this person's life and, experience all the love, all the compassion, have our dignity intact once again. And, we can have that relationship once again. So it's like a gift. Then it becomes, it's logically, it makes sense that we don't want to offer this gift to somebody who doesn't deserve it. We don't want to give it to somebody who will not value it.
I think one thing that comes in on either side is the ego. The one who is not willing to apologize tends to minimize what the person has done, tries to justify the wrong that he has done. The one who finds it difficult to forgive also feels that a lot of damage has been done and tends to sort of magnify it and also feels that either the apology has not been offered, or if it has been offered, it was not a sincere apology because
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. The title for today's session is Why Should I Forgive? This session will be in the conversation format between R. Nithya and Dr. Ramesh Bijlani. I'll start by giving a brief introduction for both of them. R. Nithya is a writer, poet, trained yoga teacher, and currently engaged in conscious marketing. With a sense of wonder and reverence for the psyche, she is committed to inner work that helps her cultivate authenticity and supports her journey toward wholeness. Dr. Ramesh Bijlani is a prolific writer and an inspirational speaker. Once a professor at AIIMS New Delhi, Dr. Bijlani is now a spiritual seeker at Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. Welcome, Nithya. Welcome, Dr. Bijlani, sir. We all look forward to a really interesting session. Over to you both.
Thank you, Arunima.
would you like to begin with some introduction to the subject or
So I think this has been a topic which has been on my mind for a while. And as I had this opportunity to be part of the Yes Talks, I had this topic ready. And because this is something since Dr. Ramesh, I've been wanting to speak to you about. Um, and in my own personal journey, this is something I have, tried and tested and somehow figured out what has worked for me in this context. So I think that is where the subject has come in, the theme has come in of forgiveness. And perhaps I could start with a small story, Dr. Ramesh, if that's all right. So while I was thinking of what I could speak about forgiveness, I thought of this small memory I had from my childhood. I think I was about 9 years old, and it was the last period, and my friend was punished. She was made to stand in the class perhaps she didn't do the homework, or perhaps she was talking during the class. So the bell rang and the school was off now. And here, as a 9 year old, I was worried what is going to happen to her. All right. And of course, the teacher was not cruel. She was not going to make her stand there throughout the day. But my 9 year old brain thought that I needed to help her. And I did not know until then what was the English word for isko maaf kar do. Okay. I did not know what is the word for maaf. So the girl sitting next to me, I asked her, how do you say this in English? She told me, okay, please forgive her. So I went up to the teacher and I pointing to my friend, I said, could you please forgive her, so she could go home. And so the teacher very, nicely smiled at me, and obviously she let her go. And obviously that the teacher had already planned to let her go, right? So, but I think while thinking back, revisiting this memory, what I realized was probably as a 9 year old, I understood two things about forgiveness in general. One was that forgiveness or the punishment when forgiveness doesn't happen, there needs to be a timeline. You cannot be angry forever. So you cannot be punished beyond school hours, right? So I thought there needs to be a timeline for something like that. And the second thing was that the formula for forgiveness is so simple that you do something wrong and you feel guilty about it, or you get punished for it. And the other person then decides to forgive you, and then you're free. So somebody forgives you and you're free. It's as simple as that. So I think as children, especially, um, children, we have a habit of feeling guilty very easily. It's very easy for children to feel guilty because I think guilt is also associated with a sense of survival. So if I do something wrong, and if a parent is angry at me, or a very important adult is angry at me, then what happens to me? What happens to, my survival? Although the child is not really thinking of that in those many words, but that is what is happening in the soul, that is what is happening in the psyche. So as a child, it's very easy to feel guilty, and that is why, as children, and to me as a 9 year old, it seemed so simple that you feel guilty and you're forgiven. These two things work so nicely, and then two people can solve any conflict they have. So I think that's how it started. And but I think now in my mid 30s, I feel that is definitely not how forgiveness works, when you want to forgive someone. So I think that would be a key introduction, I think. And all of us struggle with how do we forgive somebody who has wronged us. And as we have mentioned in the poster, especially somebody who doesn't think that they have really wronged you, who doesn't accept that you're suffering because them. How do we even go about forgiving somebody who doesn't feel guilty? So I think that is the major difference that we feel from childhood to adulthood, because you grow up and you learn that people don't really feel guilty. Some people don't, and that some people don't suffer just because they caused suffering to you. So that is, I think, that major difference between the childhood forgiveness and the adulthood forgiveness understanding. And I think that's how I think I would like to have this conversation and see what happens when, as adults, we face these situations, and how we can probably navigate.
Thank you, Nithya, for basing it largely on personal experience, and that to a childhood experience. Uh,
Mhm.
because what we learn through our own experience is what we learn best. And I'm glad that also impressed that you remember that, and uh, a deep impression on you. In fact, as children, I was reflecting as you were speaking, we are taught more often that when you have made a mistake, then you should say sorry. I'm sorry,
Mhm.
rather than forgiveness. We are taught uh, to say sorry more than forgiveness. But in a way, both happen, not only because of the child feeling afraid and therefore saying sorry, because the survival may depend on that. And the adults, of course, generally always forgive, as the class teacher did. But it's probably also more than survival. The children, I think, have a very wide open psychic, as we say. They have an innate sense of right and wrong, which is, in fact, much better probably than in adults. And that may also be the reason why they are quickly able to say sorry uh, if they have done something wrong. And even when they don't, uh, and somebody else is hurt, I think it's a common practice among children, if I recollect, and that kutti kar lete hain, which means I will not talk to you because you hurt me. And then, what happens is that the person who was guilty actually starts feeling guilty, but then the ego, prevents both of them from actually speaking. But then as time passes, I think the one who was hurt uh, starts feeling less hurt, and the person who was guilty starts feeling more guilty, and both of them miss that interaction that they had. They feel that isolation is very uh, difficult for them to bear, and then generally one of them, particularly mainly the one who was guilty, says sorry, and all is forgotten. So I think childhood is much simpler than adulthood, as you said, and certainly in among adults, it's quite common that the one who is guilty does not even feel guilty, and that makes it even more difficult to forgive. And also, the consequences of hurting somebody are quite different. Among children, it's only minor things and minor consequences. In case of adults, the consequences can be really much more serious, and they may actually have a lifelong impact on somebody's existence. And so the whole situation changes as we grow up. Uh, so now I think what partly, I mean, you already answered why it is so difficult to forgive when we are grown up, but maybe you may like to dilate a little more on why we find it difficult to forgive, and the one who is guilty, why he uh, finds it difficult to say sorry. Because the two go together, in fact. So,
Hmm. Hmm. I think there are, especially the one who has wronged you, I think, or let's say in a situation where we have wronged somebody, I think what generally happens are two things basically, right? So, one, you know that you've done something wrong. So, there has to be this basic primary awareness that you've wronged somebody, you've hurt somebody, and that with this awareness, what do you do is the next step, right? Do you acknowledge this awareness, and that's why you go over and speak to this person or apologize or whatever action you can take based on that awareness? The other thing is you're aware of it, but you decide not to do it, probably because there's too much pride, or you don't want to be the one bending over, so that is there. So I think the primary thing is that there needs to be an awareness that you've wronged. The other reason why I think people do not accept that they've really wronged somebody is something so basic as that they don't really have that awareness. So if sometimes, honestly, I used to feel this, that if I have wronged somebody, um, if I am not aware enough to know it, I may be open to probably listening to somebody say that, I've really hurt them. But there are times, when people don't really see that they've done it, and we see cases like this, and especially, for example, in relationships where we say what we call narcissistic abusive relationships, where the perpetrator doesn't see that they have really wronged that person, or in fact finds themselves as the victim. Okay, and then there's this whole thing about gaslighting the person when the person actually says that they've been hurt, right? So I think one is that you need to have the awareness that you've wronged somebody, and based on that, whether you take an action or not to apologize. And the other is that you actually don't have that awareness to accept that you're the one who's wronged somebody, and in fact you see yourself as a victim. So I think that's one part. The other part, where the person who is hurt, why do we find it so difficult to forgive? I there are surface reasons of, anger, of resentment, of, holding that grudge. Those things are there, and those are very valid human emotions when you're hurt. um, in addition to that, I think there's another reason why we don't forgive, and we may not be aware of it. But I think another reason why we don't forgive is because we know exactly what forgiveness is capable of doing, because we ourselves have been forgiven once. So when a loved one forgives us, it's like a rebirth of the soul. If it's true, genuine forgiveness, we are allowed to re enter this person's life and, experience all the love, all the compassion, have our dignity intact once again. And, we can have that relationship once again. So it's like a gift. It's truly like a rebirth of the soul, and you have the other person has put it behind them, and you can carry on with your life, as if your mistakes are not what to define you. So forgiveness in that sense becomes a gift, and it's a very beautiful, rare gift to have. And then it becomes, it's logically, it makes sense that we don't want to offer this gift to somebody who doesn't deserve it. We don't want to give it to somebody who will not value it, or throw it away, or worse, open it, look at it, and say that it's not the right color. So we don't want to waste that gift, right? So I think that's one of the major reasons I feel, I sort of like to liken it to the idea of, people who don't have children will still have a valid opinion about how to raise children, just because they themselves have been children once. So they may not have the larger picture of, the parental responsibilities that go into raising children, but they do have a very precious, important piece of the puzzle. They understand the joys and pains of childhood, right? So similarly, we know what forgiveness can give to us because we have been forgiven, and we don't want to give that to somebody else because that person doesn't deserve it or hasn't shown that they deserve it. So it's a very, very, um, natural, genuine human dilemma. So I think that's something we need to sit with instead of running away from that, and thinking that, oh, we should be all spiritual and forgive, but to just sit with this human emotion that, we have been wounded. So I think that's the part where it looks difficult. All of this looks way more difficult as adults.
I think one thing that comes in on either side is the ego, which is something which is unavoidable because we all have that in different measures, and it does have a purpose also in life. So the one who is not willing to apologize tends to minimize what the person has done, tries to justify the wrong that he has done, rather than truly sort of see it in the proper perspective and feel guilty and apologize. So the ego does come in. And in the same way, the one who finds it difficult to forgive also feels that a lot of damage has been done, and tends to sort of magnify it and also feels that either the apology has not been offered, or if it has been offered, it was not a sincere apology, because a sincere apology is more than good manners, as just saying I'm sorry. The person should truly feel guilty, the person should feel remorse, the person should sincerely sort of resolve not to repeat this mistake again. Now that's also a part of the apology. So just sort of the formality of apologizing does not help. And in the same way, the one who forgives, that person also doesn't have to forgive just to sort of get rid of him. Acha baba maaf kar diya na, bol diya ab jao. Not that sort of an apology. And also not sort of have that egoistic feeling that so I'm superior to this person because I have forgiven in spite of the hurt. So it has to be something deeper. And that is where sort of that uh, going deeper than just the surface apology or the surface forgiveness comes in. So maybe you may like to dwell upon that a bit now.
Yes, I think I completely agree. There is this thing about, whether that apology is sincere or not, and how you are. you're receiving that apology, um, have you really done that work on yourself? Before we forgive others, have we really taken care of our wound? Have we really healed ourselves, or are we accepting the other person's apology first? So I think all of those things really matter in a way. But I think another context where I think forgiveness is a huge struggle, Dr. Ramesh, is when when you look at, let's say, loved ones who are in your life and they do something wrong, or they hurt you and they apologize, and how sincere it is, how much you accept it, all of that is there. And I think that becomes like a day-to-day journey with them. And I think that's where we also need to see how much we are operating from our ego, and how much have we really grounded ourselves and healed ourselves. But at the same time, I think the other context where forgiveness becomes a very crucial point is when you are not giving a second chance to that person, when the person is not in your life anymore. Whether it's an estranged parent, an estranged sibling, an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend, or even sometimes, random people who have really come into your life, damaged your life, and just left. Right. So I think especially in those contexts, it becomes all the more important to, going back to the same thing, to sit with that emotion, and work on that. Because what usually happens, I mean, I'm maybe jumping a little bit here, but when you're trying to heal yourself, or when you're working on yourself, usually you keep hearing these things about why you should forgive others. Right. There's this urge to um, quickly forgive and put it behind you and restart to your life, or move on in your life. So I think it's important to first heal yourself, work on yourself, and at the same time, if you're the guilty party, then how much of um, how much sincerity are you bringing into your apology? I think that part is definitely there. But I feel, especially when people are very conscious of their spiritual journey, when we talk about especially spiritual circles, what usually happens is that there is this um, almost like a marketing pitch for spirituality. Forgiveness becomes that, like, the top 10 things that spiritual people would do, the top 5, definitely forgiving others becomes like the top 5. So where are we there, and how much do we want to balance ourselves? How much do we really want to jump to that stage, and how much do we want to first work on ourselves without really bypassing that human experience? So I think that is where the deep work comes in first.
Yes, I think you made a very important point when you said that maybe we are bypassing the process or the inner work that is necessary, and just sort of uh, telling the person to forgive because it's a nice thing to do, and then telling it's for your own good, which is also true. It's for the person's own good, because the fact is that nobody can change the past. What one is hurt about belongs to the past, and nobody can change it. And if the person who has hurt you is not apologizing, that is also something which you can't force the person to do. So you can neither force an apology, nor you may be able to change that person, nor you can change the past. Now, so the person has the choice of either living with that, going on repeating that to himself or herself, uh, and hurting oneself again and again by something which is actually already over, which belongs to the past. Of course, it might have consequences for the present and the future, but the fact is that one can work on the consequences rather than on the fact that it happened, and keep ruminating about that. That doesn't help. That's what doesn't help. And, uh, and therefore, I mean, forgiveness becomes a process. It's not a one-time event that one decides to forgive and one is able to forgive because it's a nice thing to do. It will help us grow spiritually and so on and so forth. That really doesn't happen. Uh, Stephen Post has actually sort of put it in a way that makes it a little more easier to relate to when he talks about forgiving. As one of he's talked about 10 ways of giving, and giving as an expression of love. And one of the ways we can give is by forgiving. So if you look at it, actually, what he has basically done is that first you require that inner work at the rational level, at the mental level. Because at the mental level also itself, we can find many reasons to forgive. For example, when I said that uh, you can't change the past, you can't force the person to apologize. Now, this is the intellect working. This is at the mental level. So what he says is, if one of the first things is the uncovering of what has actually happened, what are the consequences, and all this is at the sort of, you are trying to get a little uh, wider and deeper perspective at the mental level of what has actually happened. And then once you realize that really I can't change anything uh, by going on ruminating on it and making myself miserable, then you decide to forgive. So after uncovering comes that basic decision. You resolve that is, I will. Uh, and then once you decide, then you start understanding a little better why that person did it, what was the background of that person, what are the circumstances under which that person did it. So you start becoming a little more understanding of that person, and sort of, and also you sometimes feel that maybe did I also in any way contribute to what actually happened. So all those things happen as a result of the working of the intellect. Then go deeper, higher than the intellect, that is at the level of the soul. Then you start finding further reasons why you should forgive. And one finds that, well, uh, the- if the person had not done this, then maybe I would not have uh, done all this inner work, which has made me experience an inner progress. I have progressed in some way. I have become a different type of person. I have a person who understands life better. So all this happened because of this. So in a way, uh, I'm grateful to this person that such a thing happened. And also, then you start seeing it in a more dispassionate way, not as something which by which one is hurt, but one starts seeing it in a dispassionate way as just an experience, which, like all good and bad experiences, has enriched me in some way. So when one does that, then you have a more charitable view of the other person as a manifestation of the divine, as a child of the same God, whatever way you may like to put it. So you have a better understanding and a more charitable view of that person at a deeper level. And you also yourself feel that, well, this was an experience I've gone through, it has enriched me. So uh, it has in a way helped me, and now let me see what I can do to move on from here as a person who is different from the one who was before the experience, and all the whole a better person, a more evolved person, and a person who has a better understanding of what life is like. So unless one goes through this type of process of this inner work, it can be really very difficult to forgive, and this will not help forgiving. Just deciding to forgive because that's a nice thing to do certainly is not the way to do it, as you said. So would you like to dilate a little
Yeah,
more on what this inner
yeah.
work and so on is about?
Yeah, right, right. So this actually, what the pointers you said, the steps that you mentioned,
Mm,
those really probably work exactly like that for a lot of people, and it works best when it is happening organically. So before I expand on inner work, I want to quickly go back to the spiritual bypassing point that I had
mm,
mentioned, because this is exactly the stage where we can, as people maybe who are consciously on the spiritual path, can start having this sense of spiritual inflation, where we think that, okay, as a spiritual person I need to forgive, like you said, because it's a nice thing to do, or as a spiritual person, by now I should be above all that, right? So a lot of people who probably do not go through the stage and just bypass, they hold a lot of guilt, like a very hidden guilt, because they still have anger against parents or siblings, or past lovers, etc. So there's always the work which is not done, obviously, that goes into your shadow, as Carl Jung says. So I think when you constantly keep hearing about spirituality and forgiveness go together, you start having this sense of, um, forgiveness starts feeling like this burden in a way, and as a victim, Now you also feel that, okay, I'm the one who went through grief, I'm the one who was hurt, who was abused, who was traumatized, and now I also have the burden of forgiving the other person. So then what happens, we have two choices from here if we are not really conscious. One is that we decide to rebel against this fancy thing called forgiveness, and we decide not to forgive. The other thing that we do is we actually take that bait. We decide to forgive. It becomes like a decision, it becomes like an act. Okay, I'm going to do this now because I'm a spiritual person. So in that sense, like you mentioned, forgiveness becomes a moral achievement, like a performance, almost like a spiritual performance. And then it stays, the emotion still continues to stay unless you work on it. So the reason why this stage is so important, and I keep talking about spiritual bypassing, is um, you know even when we try to let go of all identities, the spiritual identity is the last defense of the ego. So the ego will want to hold on to that spiritual identity by saying that I'm a spiritual person, so I will forgive. I'm a spiritual person, so I'll do this. So how aware can we be in that stage so that we do not take that bypass? And then we actually go into the longer journey of inner work, where, as you mentioned, we start looking at, um, maybe start asking questions as to what part of this trigger, or what part of this situation triggers me, or what does this reveal about me? What were my patterns? What were the things that I need to work on? What were my shadows? How did I contribute to this? And when I say these questions, I do not mean to victimize the person who has gone through this. It's not a very new age spirituality sort of thing, where you say, how did you attract this negative thing in your life? It's not really that. It's about looking within and basically seeing what patterns have I continued in my life, so that when this situation happened, I continue to do that. And that is why I added to the pain that I have experienced. So I think to sit with that, to work on your shadows. And I think this is where, going back to the childhood sort of forgiveness, when a child is hurt, and the reason why I said that, it sort of links to the sense of survival, because when a child feels hurt, because the ego hasn't fully developed in the child, the soul is wounded, the psyche of the child is wounded. And that is why when we want to go into conscious parenting, we want to really see how we are treating the child. But as adults, we forget that our soul also gets wounded. It's not just the emotions or the feelings, or okay, my heart is aching. It's not just that. It's our soul is wounded. And so I think this is where we need to remember not to bypass, but to remember that we are humans, and to treat any wound like we would treat any other, like an animal would do it, like a dog would do it. So when a dog is hurt, he would find a secluded spot and lick his wounds. So I think this is the inner work that we need to do. We need to lick our spiritual wounds. We need to do that practice, and as we keep doing that, um, we discover the wounded soul, and we need to sit with that anger. And I keep saying that again and again. So I'll give you a quick example. Let's say you think of this person who has hurt you, or let's say you see them somewhere, and this quick sudden anger comes up inside you, right? Now, instead of shutting it down, instead of suppressing it, because now you're a spiritual person, instead of doing that, let that anger come up. You don't have to act on it, but you can feel it in your body, basically honoring your this vital emotion, this vital message that your body is trying to give you, holding it like you would hold a baby, like a crying baby. Like when a baby is crying, we get curious as to, why is this baby crying? Does he need food? Does he need a change in the diaper? Is it sleep time? Is it tummy time? Whatever, right? We try to figure it out. I think we just need to get curious with our emotions, and guaranteed that our emotions are not the final truth. Yet they are, messengers, and they tell us what is it in us which is still unhealed, and where do we need to work. So I think every time, maybe you think of that incident or that person, probably journaling, it works for me. maybe for other people something else, maybe meditation, some sort of visualization could work. So to sit with that moment, okay, this moment triggered me, and it's a year long work. It will take probably a lifelong work for, in really crucial cases. So I think that is the inner work. And when we keep doing that week after week and month after month and year after year, we one day probably wake up and realize that we are suddenly free. That the question that whether I should forgive or not no longer exists. It sort of floats away because your inner work has taken the center stage. And the equation, the formula from childhood, which was you're forgiven and you're free, or you forgive and you're free, sort of turns on its head. And now you're free first, and forgiveness actually no longer matters. It sort of floats away. The idea of whether I should forgive this person, whether I should continue to be angry at this, none of that matters anymore. And uh, I think, like all paradoxes, when you're not chasing something, that thing sort of finds you. Like when you're trying to chase a butterfly, it's obviously flying away. But when you stand still, the butterfly may choose to or may not choose to sit on your shoulder, right? So I think it's something like that. So if forgiveness arrives when you've done all that inner work, if forgiveness finally decides to arrive, it will arrive not as a moral achievement, but because your soul has outgrown that pain, because it has outgrown that trauma. It no longer fits, like a growing child outgrows his clothes. It's not deliberate. It's not a decision, like you said. It's not a decision. It doesn't happen in a moment. It's a process. And suddenly, you realize that the child has grown and the clothes no longer fit. The soul has grown and the pain no longer fits it. So I think that's the culmination of um, that inner work. And we need to be patient with it, because we cannot be chasing forgiveness because I want to be spiritual. We need to just put in the work and see if that butterfly decides to land on our shoulder or not. I think that's the deep work that we look into. And I think if it does arrive, it it's like a consequence of the work. you know it's not a necessity for spiritual growth. It's like a byproduct. Forgiveness becomes a byproduct of your growth. Not you're growing not because you're forgiven, but you're forgiven because you're grown. Yeah.
I love that idea of spiritual bypass because on one hand the person is hurt, on the other hand the person is told that no matter what you should forgive because it's a nice thing to do, and or spiritual people do it. So instead of forgiveness making the person free, instead of liberating the person, this becomes an additional burden to carry. So part of the misery is because the person is hurt, and it adds to the misery that now that the person also has to forgive, is supposed to forgive, is compelled to forgive, or feels that if I do not forgive, that itself is something wrong, and starts feeling guilty that why I'm not able to forgive. So it becomes a burden. So that and as you said quite rightly, that anger and resentment and so on are natural, and they come from our evolutionary past because they're coping mechanisms, and therefore one should not wish them away. One can't just sort of have a clear switch that now it is off, anger on and anger off. We don't have a switch like that. So there we have to give it time, we have to process it, and part of the processing to start with will be at the mental and emotional and mental level, and then it will go deeper. So we have to allow that time for that to happen. And you said quite rightly, after that inner change has taken place to an extent that now we feel that I'm ready to forgive, ready to genuinely forgive, then that forgiveness is natural and is a byproduct of that inner change. But all the same, it remains a bit like that chicken and egg story: which came first, the chicken or the egg? Because it is the processing of the wound that led to this inner change, and that inner change made it easy to forgive. But all the same, this process which led to that inner change started because of the hurt. So the hurt came first, and then the one worked on it. So one thing leads to the other, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of putting it. I think, it's a change in perspective,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I think once we are at that stage, we can basically look at that moment in our life or that pain, and then we see that, yeah, okay, it's because of that. That was the trigger for our journey, our spiritual growth. Yeah.
And of course, in some situations, it can be extremely difficult to forgive. Uh, and uh, just to give a few examples from real people who have made their life history public. One of them has spoken on our platform, Audrey Carlson, whose 20-year-old daughter was murdered by her former boyfriend, by the daughter's former boyfriend. And she says that it has been extremely difficult to forgive, and she's not sure whether she has been able to forgive. But all the same, it she has processed it. It has led to an inner change. She's a different type of person now, and uh, it has sort of the inner change that he has gone through has also given it an outer expression through all the good work that she's doing because of that. But then she sort of came up with a sort of a substitute she found for genuine forgiveness. And the substitute she said was that uh, no judgment. I don't have to judge the person who did it. No expectations. I don't expect an apology or remorse from that person. And let go. Let go uh, means that I just have to uh, offer that person, offer what he did to the divine. The divine, let the divine work on him and give him whatever he deserves. So, and for that, she said she did a ritual, the balloon ritual. She visualized a balloon in which she put the guilty person. The balloon was those helium-filled balloons, which go up, that type of a balloon, and then she just let it go to the divine, and you take care of it. So that is the way she has been able to forgive. Then there's another person, Christina Noble. She grew up in a household with 8 siblings, and she was the eldest. When this eldest sibling, Christina, was about 8, uh, her mother died, and the father had been all along an alcoholic and a physically abusive father. Now he knew that he can't take care of all these children, so he sent them to different institutions. Uh, Now, this eldest Christina, when she was about 16, then the institution felt that she was now an adult and she should go back home. So they informed her father, put her on a train, gave her £5, and told her that now you are an adult, you can take care of yourself. The father came to the railway station to receive her. Uh, when she got down, he received her like a dutiful father, but then told her that uh, you can give me. She asked her whether he had any money. So she had £5. Give me those £5. I'll go and get change so that we can take a bus home. He went into a pub. She thought probably that's where he'll get the change from. But then probably he had a few drinks and disappeared from the back door of the pub. So she was left behind on the pavement after waiting for several hours for her father to come. And she had to sleep on pavements in public parks and so on and beg for food. And one night when she was sleeping at some such public place, she was gang raped. And so, to cut a long story short, she finally sort of discovered one of her brothers staying somewhere. She went and stayed with him. And then, she started getting in her visions that her mission was to work for children in Vietnam. So, at the age of about 40, she went there and started working with the children there, established a foundation, Christina Noble Foundation, which has by now helped 200,000 children in Vietnam and Mongolia. But then all this she could do, she said, because eventually she realized that there was no shortcut to forgiveness. And this, she says, was facilitated by 3 things. One was she got a therapist who was a patient listener who listened to her without judging her. The second thing that helped her was that she wrote her autobiography. And she says, I must have written this book 50 times in my mind before I actually put it down on paper. So, one goes through that. But then that helped ventilate the way journaling does. So she wrote her autobiography. And the third thing she says helped her was this work with children in Vietnam. So the love that she could extend to these children helped her heal. So that's how she healed herself and she could forgive. And and these are two sort of striking examples which occurred to me. And of course, I mean, uh, it happens a lot. I've seen in uh, people who are going through marital issues. Uh, they find it very difficult to forgive, but then sometimes there is no other alternative. You can create a geographical distance, but even after that, there's a whole sort of incidents keep replaying in your mind again and again. Say in case of domestic violence. So they may not be living together anymore, uh, but the scenes keep replaying, and there's no other alternative except to forgive. But then it has to go through that process. It has to be given time. But then that is the only way. Otherwise, the past incidents keep troubling the person through remote control.
Right. I think the examples that you gave, they are a huge testament to the human spirit and how the spirit basically bounces back, has shows resilience and finds a way to survive and eventually live this life. I heard i heard a line about forgiveness decades ago when I was a teenager and I used to watch the Oprah Winfrey Show. A person there, I don't know the name, so I'm borrowing this quote. A person there said, forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been better. So I think when we keep replaying something in our mind because we think that, oh, we should have known better, we should have done better, we should have stood up for ourselves, or we should have put an end to that, we think that we could have somehow changed it. Because again, it's to do with how our ego operates. The ego prefers to be enlightened rather than to acknowledge that at one point in time it was powerless. So I think to just give up that hope, to the let go part, to accept that yes, we couldn't do better, yes, that is how it was, that could be a decent starting point to start the inner work process.
I think now it's time to open the session to the audience in case they have some questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Nithya, for such a meaningful talk. It was really insightful and a heartfelt one. We are grateful for the wisdom and perspective that you brought to this topic. So, we are opening the session to the participants. Chidanand, sir, you have raised the hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. This topic looks very simple but very difficult to practice it. There are a lot of perspectives. Nitya and Ramesh ji, brought it up. And in all of the conversation, what I heard it is we are forgiving someone. And my question is, what about that someone is the person in the mirror of ourselves? How do we forgive ourselves some of the act what we have done in the past? Is there any perspective for that? I feel that is more difficult than forgiving the others, according to me, in my experiences. Any thoughts?
um Dr. Ramesh, is it okay if I go first?
Sure.
Yeah, so thank you, sir, for the question. I think here I would look into the light and the shadow side of our personhood. And when we see that we have done something wrong, or something perhaps unforgivable, we put it inside us, we sort of hide it, And then when we finally get to see it, we, have all these mixed emotions of, we are ashamed of ourselves, we don't want to accept ourselves. And so what usually happens is all that goes into the shadow, but there must be something, just to look at it. I'm reminded of this famous quote by Dr. Maya Angelou: when you know better, you do better. So just to accept and sit with this person in the mirror. Who was this person? What was their life like? What patterns were they following? What capabilities did they have? How much awareness did they have? Are you and that person the same person? Probably not. That is why you can look at that person now and, see that they have wronged. So if that person did not have that kind of awareness, you see that, you speak to that person, let that person speak to you. And eventually it is not about, yeah, let's say there's something legally wrong. Then yes, there are some legal consequences to it, something like that. But let's say there's something morally wrong and we sort of live with it. But how do we integrate that wrongness into our life? Is it through shame? Are we going to be ashamed of ourselves forever? Or are we going to make peace with that? And that takes that sort of work, to sit and speak to that person 2 years ago, 6 months ago, whoever you were at that time, and you acknowledge that you have wronged, and you let that person say why. It could be a very difficult conversation, I think. What if the person in the mirror still doesn't think that they're wrong? What if they have a reason why they did it, and there's a justification to why you did it, even if the awareness is there as to I have done something wrong. So I think just having that conversation, and in my experience, journaling has really helped me, because you have all these voices inside which can really communicate at all at once, and you can put it down and take a step back and let the self, or the higher self, or however we want to call it, just to then look at it and then see that situation. Integrating it is more important than, I think forgiveness would follow. But to understand, I think the same steps that Dr. Ramesh mentioned that we would try on the other person, I think we must try that on ourselves too. Like, why did this person do something wrong? What was lacking in their life? What was their childhood like? I think that sort of compassion, if we can offer to ourselves, we will be able to integrate. Yeah, Dr. Ramesh, would you like to add?
Sure. Chidananji, what you said has a certain amount of truth in it. Some people are always complaining and criticizing others. Uh, there has been no major incident, but yet, they can always see something wrong with the other person. In that situation, yes, one should look within and find that what is wrong with me. And very often we'll find that the other person is just offering us a mirror. The defects which we find in the other person are actually the defects which we have. But then the fact is that there are situations which are not so clear cut. For example, what is the fault of a girl who is raped? What is the fault of a child who is physically abused or sexually abused in childhood? Because the fact is that people are born at different levels of consciousness because of where they left off in their previous life. So some people are born at a lower level of consciousness. Added to that are adverse circumstances in life. If the childhood has been traumatic, the person has been physically or sexually abused or both. If the child had has suffered a sense of insecurity and abandonment in childhood because of the relationship between the parents being very stormy. And now these are all things which can leave behind scars throughout life. And this person who has not received love in his life, in his childhood, or who arrived at a lower level of consciousness to start with, or both, now such a person is likely to grow up into an individual who may really uh, traumatize somebody else's life, ruin somebody else's life, because they are not able to have good relationships, including the relationship with the partner. And the fact is that then it's not that it's the partner's fault. uh, because they've not seen love in their life, just that little bit of ray of hope is enough for them to feel that I'm in love with that person. But they neither are able to see whether they truly love somebody, nor are they able to really truly love anybody, because they have never had a good example of what love is about. And therefore, there can be situations in which one can't just say that if somebody has wronged us, that person is just giving us, providing us a mirror. Probably these are all the defects that we have. Well, we can still thank that person for making us go within and maybe see some of our faults. But all the same, it can't be just sort of a mirror, and uh, just seeing some of our faults will not necessarily be able to overcome all the anger and resentment we have. Eventually, we may come to a point where we are able to love this person, but we may not be able to like this person, and that is not necessary. We can love everybody, we don't have to like everybody. Loving everybody does not mean that we lose our sense of discrimination. Loving only means that even for this person who, obviously, for whatever reasons, because of his previous lives or because of what he suffered in his childhood or whatever he has gone through, because of that, this person is in a certain state. This love can inspire compassion. This love can inspire uh, doing something which may provide some hints to this person for correcting himself. But that doesn't mean that we have to like this person or just sort of see that, well, this is person is a mirror to us. That would be an oversimplification as well as not necessarily appropriate.
Yeah, someone has raised the hand. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shrikant. I just wanted to have a short comment first and a question. My comment is, I think actions or infractions or the wrongdoings are multi-level, as you mentioned earlier. Legal infractions have different implications. Ethical have different implications or different gravity, and moral have different significance. And intuitive one that we all are born with, are taught, okay, are the guardrails which help the society move forward and make a cohesive society. So I think in every situation, depending upon what kind of wrong we are dealing with, our reactions also differ because the gravity of the infractions are different, I think, at times. My question is, are we, by any chance, equating forgiveness to helplessness? Because when we have agency, when we have advantage, when we have strength, and wrong is done to us, it's easier to respond to them and also to forgive eventually. But are we saying that forgiveness is a substitute for helplessness and will allow us to accept injustice? Just a question. Thank you.
Nithya,
Yeah,
would you
Dr.
like to take that,
Ramesh.
please?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful point. I think I really liked this. Are we sort of confusing forgiveness for helplessness? And I think we could. There is no denial that this could be a very, very interesting. Uh, we may miss that difference between the two if we are not really conscious about it. This is especially, I think, this is especially when we keep hearing phrases like forgiveness will set you free, or you can't change the past, or the one who forgives has the bigger heart, things like that. I think when we listen to things like this, and especially when we know that we can't really do anything about that situation, there is this, um, how do I put this, there is this inner sort of this moment where internally we feel that, oh, okay, maybe all I can do is just let it go and move on. So there could be that sort of confusion. However, This is where I think instead of jumping to forgiveness, we need to take that time. There will be situations where we still can't do anything about, that situation. In case we get to do something, in case we are able to stop something or fix that situation for us, um, we will take that action. If we are capable of that, we will take that action. And yet and yet that hurt or that wound would have still hit our soul somehow. So that still needs to be processed. So forgiveness in that sense is that whole process where we are processing it for ourselves, for our own self healing. And not necessarily, this is where I think I go back to what we keep hearing, that uh, forgiveness is not for the other person but for yourself. What a cliche thing to say. And what it could also generate this anger inside us. But again, going back to this point of the process, this is exactly why we need to process it, even when we are able to fix that situation or change it. And especially when we are not able to change it, we need to take that time. We need to have, even if the feeling of helplessness comes up, we need to hold it. In my experience, I think if somebody had asked me to forgive somebody, I just wouldn't. I just, out of sheer rebellion, I wouldn't. Because I've been hurt, right? I need to heal myself first. So I think that helplessness will happen when you feel like you're a victim. Once we do that inner work, once we heal our soul, we do away with the victim narrative. And once we do away with the victim narrative, the helplessness goes away, and we are able to differentiate between what is true, genuine forgiveness and what once was helplessness. Yeah, Dr. Ramesh, if you would like to expand on this.
Yes, Nithya, I agree with you. Uh, Forgiveness may look like helplessness, but actually it is not. Genuine forgiveness is not just a compromise. It is not giving in because we can't do anything about it. It's not helplessness. In fact, not only that, uh, one should not uh, refuse to get legal help or any other type of help that is available to the victim, but then it that help has to be taken in a different spirit. As you said, the processing of the wound still has to go on within, and still forgiveness has to happen. And forgiveness can include whatever legal redressal or whatever one is seeking. Uh, what I say in such cases, I mean, where especially in case of marital problems, is that uh, fight the battle, fight it in the spirit of the Gita, in the sense that number one, uh, you are placed in a situation where you have an opportunity to fight for good against evil, defend justice against injustice. You have been given that opportunity the way Arjun was given in the Gita. But then, as Arjun was told, that you don't have to be attached to the outcome. Whatever the outcome of the case, at least you have done your bit. You have not just sat quiet, and it is not for you, it is for the society in general. Otherwise, people would feel that we can get away with anything. So, if the redressal is available to you, seek it. And let the other person realize that I can't get away with it, and let the society in general see that you can't get away with everything. But you're fighting it in the spirit of the Gita, in the sense that you are not attached to the outcome. Uh, the outcome may or may not be in your favor. What you get out of the battle is not important. And not only that, if you are processing your own within at the spiritual level, starting with the mental level and going to the spiritual, giving its time, uh, you'll find that you have forgiven the person, although you are still fighting the battle. So that is what keeps you at peace. You are at peace if you are not thinking about what I will get out of this, what will be the outcome. You are thinking only of it as a battle that you have to pick up to defend good against evil, to defend justice against injustice, to set an example in the society that you can't get away with whatever you like. You can't get away with it.
Thank you, sir. There are a few questions in the chat box. Uh, Amita ji asks, "What is the name of the book, sir?" I think you mentioned a book during the session.
I think I mentioned the book by Stephen Post. The book is Why Good Things Happen to Good People.
Okay. Yeah. The next question is, sir, if this person with low consciousness wants to be in the life of the person who has some higher consciousness, then how the victim who understands with compassion should let that person in their lives or not?
Dr. Ramesh, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Well, it will all depend upon the degree of mismatch and how that lower consciousness is expressed. Because there can be an expression which makes it impossible for them to stay together. And on the other hand, uh, if the mismatch is not that much and the expression is not vicious, the sort of from the low level of consciousness, assuming that it is the man who is the one who is at the lower level of consciousness, the expressions which sometimes become difficult to live with are uh, alcoholism, domestic violence, the two generally go together, and extramarital affairs, especially extramarital affairs, which become a recurring pattern. Now, these are some of the things which may be associated with that lower level of consciousness, and then it becomes difficult to live. But some milder expressions, yes, there'll always be some disparity in the level of consciousness, and both benefit from this mismatch to some extent, because the one who's at the lower level may be affected by the positivity, and the one who is at a higher level of consciousness gets an opportunity to shower love unconditionally. So this person provides an opportunity to give. So both are benefiting from it.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, are we able to truly forgive anyone only when we heal and process the feeling in ourselves?
Okay.
So
Um, in my experience, I think my answer is like quick yes. Um, I think what happens is forgiveness is such a self-healing thing to do, or that is how we understand self forgiveness as. So it's something that we really want to do, also to free the other person from our life or to free ourselves. But I think whether we forgive through meditate, by doing meditation, or by writing letters and then burning them, however way we want to forgive, or to actually accepting somebody's apology, all of that without the deep inner work can be a very temporary thing in our life. And it leads to what I have picked up this phrase from somewhere, premature forgiveness. So it sort of leads to premature forgiveness because we ourselves have not really matured to get there. And like Dr. Ramesh mentioned, that it's not really a decision in a way, it's not really an act, it's a process. And it happens when our inner climate is ready. Like a plant will grow because the conditions are ready, because there is the right soil and the right sunlight and the right water. So similarly, once our inner weather is ready, forgiveness just probably happens. It's not really something that it's not really a conscious decision. It's more like I mentioned earlier, like a byproduct of something. It's because you understand, you see what has happened, you see the other person, or you simply want to release yourself. And that doesn't necessarily happen, or even if it happens for a very short time, unless we do that, that long journey of inner work. But it doesn't mean that we have to be angry for that long. It simply means that we have to be honest with ourselves for that long. Yeah, Dr. Ramesh, would you like to add something here?
I think you said everything that I could have said better than I would have.
Um, Sir, did you mention any book by Miss Christina? Amita ji is saying by the lady Christina.
Achha, the autobiography.
Maybe, yeah.
Uh, I'll just tell you. This is the autobiography of Christina Noble is Bridge Across My Sorrows. The title is Bridge Across My Sorrows. That's the title of the autobiography.
Thank you, sir. So, one last question. Forgiveness is very much an element of emotional intelligence. So, can we buy or purchase forgiveness?
Oh, I don't think I understand the question. As in, what does the questioner mean by buying and purchasing forgiveness?
Ojaswini ji, if you are here, would you like to elaborate on your
Yeah, I'm
question?
very much here. What I meant is that these days, people are hurting people very frequently and they're forgiving also. So for me, like, these days, forgiveness also comes with a price tag. I mean, you can easily make it a deal. Okay, I hurt you, and so I am willing to pay the double amount, and also can you accept it? So that's why it asked that can you buy and sell forgiveness or not?
I think in the larger context, I mean, if I don't look at individual relationships, day-to-day intimate relationships, but if we look at uh, something different, let's say a company has caused something, caused suffering to a group of people, or the factory has caused suffering to a group of people, and they sort of pay the compensation. Or even in, let's say, individual legal cases where you get compensated because you hurt somebody. I think that if that is, let's say, if that is the kind of buying or purchasing of forgiveness you're asking for, I think that has a very different purpose. It is something that the person who has hurt or caused suffering, they need to sort of do something apart from just saying sorry. For the society to go on in a ethical, moral way and a legal way, those things sort of need to happen. And it doesn't necessarily mean that money is going to fix everything. So for example, even in the case of um, let's say a rape survivor, there are times when there are some sort of compensation apart from the punishment that the perpetrator gets. In those things, it's not necessarily okay, here's the money, and now I'm absolved of whatever crime I did. It's not really that. It's sort of a message. I think probably in the older days, when you did something wrong, you had to do the whole thing of the prashchit. You had to suffer equally, similarly, so that you prove to the other person that, okay, yes, I have caused the suffering and I understand how painful that is. I think now it is obviously a little more civilized, a little more sophisticated. So I think that way it needs to done. The society needs to do that, because you need to suffer somewhere. And when it comes to money, because money is such a huge resource, or it's pleasure or pain. So I think a cut there, when you're paying somebody else for that, that sort of you know is the one of the right things to do in a way. Other than that, in personal situations, let's say you've done something wrong uh, to a loved one, and instead of saying sorry, you just buy them a piece of jewelry, and the other person forgives you. I don't know how long that equation can carry on, without actually being honest in such intimate relationships. Yeah, Dr. Ramesh, over to you.
Yes, I think in some situations, I mean, as you said, in an office or in a workplace, uh, it may become a transactional sort of a thing, and it can really be not called forgiveness. It's more of a compensation. But in uh, other situations, the type that we have been talking about, uh, money or an object given as a gift to compensate for the hurt, will not probably work. In long term relationships, the sincerity of intent uh, is generally easily discovered, and that is what matters. Not what is done on the surface, whether it is just an apology offered or forgiveness granted as a matter of formality, or whatever it is. That doesn't work. Because the words that we use or the object that we give are only on the surface. And it's not very difficult to see behind the surface, especially when you know the person quite well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Nithya. And we have some beautiful words of appreciation for you both. Profound sharings, helpful insights, and thank you for picking up such a beautiful and relevant topic. Heartfelt, and insightful meeting.
I saw one of the comments from my friend, an old friend, Dr. Nick Reed.
Yeah, of course.
You probably read
Yeah,
that out
yeah.
without his name.
Thank you for such a heartfelt and insightful meet.
He's a soulmate sort of. He worked for a long time in Sheffield. Now I think he lives in the hills somewhere in Scotland. And
Wow.
sort of call him my soulmate because our careers have been followed a very similar career graph. We both started as physiologists, worked on nutrition and dietary fiber, and then he's also a writer, has contributed to a textbook of written a textbook of physiology, and uh, then after retirement, he also counsels people.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, sir. That's really beautiful. So before we close today's session, I'll quickly inform that the recording of today's session will be published on our YouTube channel, Yes Spirituality. You can visit the channel and explore vast content on yoga, education, spirituality, and related subjects like psychology and wellness. Thank you, participants, for being with us today. We'll close today's session now with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.